Why was she smiling? Not outwardly. Nothing so obvious. But there was something in the way Sergeant Anna Petrova moved through the compound at Fob Nightingale that morning, something that resembled peace. The dust clung to everything here. It worked its way into machinery, into lungs, into the cracks of a soldier's resolve. The mountains rose like broken teeth against a merciless sky, and the wind carried only one message: you don't belong here. But Anna walked through it all as if she'd been born in this desolation. Her boots made soft, rhythmic sounds in the gravel. Her uniform was clean. Too clean, that's what they noticed first. Corporal Javi Jax Rotova saw her from his position against the concrete blast barrier. He nudged Private Chen, and both men watched her cross the sun-baked compound with the casual cruelty of young soldiers who'd learned to measure worth in muscle mass and bravado. She was carrying a long rectangular rifle case, its polymer shell scuffed but well-maintained. Jax leaned closer to Chen, his voice dripping with amusement. "Look at that. Command's sending us accountants now." Chen spat a stream of brownish saliva into the dust. "Maybe she's here to audit our ammo count, but that case is full of binders and a calculator." Their laughter was low and dry, quickly swallowed by the oppressive heat. Anna heard them. Of course she heard them. She heard everything. The whisper of wind over razor wire, the distant clank of a wrench in the motor pool, the condescension in their voices. She registered it all as ambient noise, data to be filed away and ignored. Her focus was singular, the canvas flap of the tactical operations center ahead. She walked past the two soldiers without a glance. That lack of reaction seemed to displease Jax more than an angry retort would have. He watched her go, his smirk fading into a sneer. "Probably a ref," he muttered, using the derogatory acronym for rear echelon personnel. "Got lost on her way to the mess hall." Inside the tent, the air was thick, stale coffee and ozone from humming servers. Maps covered every vertical surface, marked with circles, arrows, cryptic symbols that meant life or death to someone. In the center of this controlled chaos stood General Marcus Thorne. He was built on a grand scale, barrel chest, booming voice, a jaw that looked carved from granite. He cultivated an image of old-school command, a man who believed wars were won with grit and overwhelming firepower, not satellites and spreadsheets. He was mid-tirade when she entered, his voice bouncing off the tent walls like artillery fire. "Intel says light resistance. The last time Intel said light resistance, we lost a striker and half a platoon in Koringal. I want every asset we have spun up and ready to burn that valley to the ground, if so much as a goat looks at my convoy sideways." An aide, a young captain with perpetually wide eyes, pointed a trembling finger toward the entrance. "General, the specialist is here, Sergeant Petrova." Thorne turned. His gaze swept over Anna, eyes accustomed to seeing hardened operators and grizzled NCOs. Those eyes lingered on her with open skepticism. He saw the neat uniform, the placid expression, the unassuming build, his face, already florid from yelling, darkened further. "This is it," he boomed, disbelief dripping from every syllable. "This is the asset they sent from high command. Sergeant, did you take a wrong turn out of the finance department?" Anna stood at attention, her gaze fixed on a point just over his shoulder. "Sergeant Petrova reporting as ordered, sir." Her voice was calm, level, utterly devoid of emotion. It was the voice of someone placing a takeout order, not a soldier reporting to a three-star general in a war zone. The lack of deference, of the expected mix of fear and awe, seemed to infuriate Thorne more than her appearance. He snatched a file from the captain's hands and slapped it down on the central map table. "Petrova, Anna," he read, his tone mocking. "Specialty listed as range assessment and ballistics calibration. What in the hell is that? Are you here to make sure our rifles are pointing forward?" The other officers in the tent shifted uncomfortably. A few of the junior enlisted staff tried and failed to hide their smiles. The general's dismissal was a license for everyone else to follow suit. Anna felt their collective judgment wash over her. A familiar sensation, an irrelevant one. She didn't answer his rhetorical question. She simply waited. Her silence was a vacuum in the loud, aggressive space Thorne created around himself. He hated it. He flipped a page in her file, eyes scanning the top sheet. The unclassified summary provided for men like him who didn't have the clearance or the patience for the truth. Well, Sergeant Ballistics calibration. Tomorrow we're running a supply convoy through the Zarin Valley. He tapped a red-lined route on the map. The locals call it the Grinder, apt name. We'll have 2 fire teams providing overwatch, one on the East Ridge, one on the West. The East Ridge is the primary engagement sector. That's where the real soldiers will be. He looked up at her, a dismissive wave of his hand concluding her assignment. You can take your survey equipment up to the West Ridge. Find a nice, safe spot. Keep your head down. Observe and report. Don't touch your radio unless you see a bird you can't identify. Am I clear? Crystal, sir. The single word was clipped, precise. Good, Thorne grunted, already turning his back on her, the matter forgotten. Now let's talk about air support. I want a flight of warthogs on standby 5 minutes out. Anna performed a crisp about-face and walked out of the tent back into the blistering sun. The dismissal was complete. She was not a weapon to be used. She was a box to be checked. A body sent from higher authority that the general was forced to accommodate but not respect. As she walked toward the transient barracks, she passed Jax and Chen again. They'd obviously heard the exchange, or at least the general's booming voice. Told you, Jax said, loud enough for her to hear. West Ridge, safest seat in the house. She's just there to watch the fireworks. Anna continued walking, her expression unchanged. She didn't need their respect. She didn't need the general's approval. She needed a clear line of sight, an accurate wind reading, and a stable firing position. The rest was just noise. The valley would provide the silence. But there was something she hadn't told them. Not yet. Something they couldn't see in her file, couldn't read in her face, couldn't comprehend with their limited understanding of what war actually required. They thought size mattered. They thought volume mattered. They were about to learn what precision meant. What does it feel like to be invisible? Not metaphorically. Not in the way people use the word when they feel ignored at a party or overlooked for a promotion. What does it feel like to move through a world where everyone sees you but no one recognizes what you are? Anna knew the answer. She'd lived it her entire career. The pre-dawn chill was sharp, a welcome respite from the relentless heat that would soon bake the mountainside. She moved through the darkness with practiced, silent grace. The weight of her pack and rifle case was a familiar comfort, a known quantity in a world of variables. She declined the offer of a ride to the base of the ridge. She preferred the solitude of the long walk. It gave her time to acclimate, to feel the terrain under her boots, to listen to the land before it was disturbed by the rumble of engines. She reached her designated position on the West Ridge an hour before sunrise. It was, as the general had implied, suboptimal from a conventional tactical perspective. It offered a good view of the valley floor, but it was exposed. Sparse cover. The East Ridge, where Jax, Chen, and their fire team were setting up, was higher. Better rock formations for concealment and defense. Thorne had given her the cheap seats. He didn't know that she preferred an unobstructed view. She didn't unpack immediately. Instead, she sat. She watched the darkness fade. She felt the temperature shift. She listened to the valley wake up. A bird called from somewhere below. The wind changed direction twice, then settled into a steady pattern from the northwest. She noted the humidity, the barometric pressure, the way sound traveled in this particular geography. This was her ritual. This was her preparation. Not push-ups or weapons checks, but communion with the environment that would either betray her or become her ally. When the sun finally broke over the eastern peaks, painting the valley in shades of amber and gold, she began to unpack. The rifle case opened with soft clicks. Inside, wrapped in foam and cloth, was her weapon, not military issue, not something found in an armory catalog. This was custom-built, hand-assembled, each component selected for a specific purpose. The stock had been shaped to fit her shoulder. The scope had been zeroed to her eye relief. The trigger had been tuned to her exact pull-weight preference. This wasn't just a rifle. It was an extension of her will. She assembled it with the quiet efficiency of a surgeon preparing for a delicate operation. Barrel to receiver, bolt carrier group, magazine well, scope mount, bipod legs extended and locked. She worked without hurry, each movement deliberate. When it was complete, she settled into position behind it, prone, weight distributed, breathing controlled. She scanned the valley through her scope, tracing the route the convoy would take. She identified potential ambush points, natural choke points, areas where an attacking force would have advantage. There and there and there. 6 locations total. If she were planning an ambush, those are the positions she'd use. The question wasn't whether an attack would come. The locals didn't call this place the Grinder because of the scenery. The question was which position the enemy would choose and how many shooters they'd commit. She heard voices on the radio net. The convoy was forming up. Thorne's voice boomed through, confident and aggressive, giving final instructions. On the east ridge, she could see movement. Jax and his team getting into position. They had the better tactical position for a traditional firefight. What they didn't have was what she did. Patience. The convoy rolled out at 800 hours, 6 vehicles, 2 Humvees leading, 3 cargo trucks in the middle, 1 Humvee trailing. They moved at a steady pace, engines growling, dust plumes rising behind them like signal fires. Anna tracked them through her scope. She tracked the ridgelines, she tracked the tree lines, she tracked the shadows. Her breathing was slow, measured. Her heart rate was calm. This was the part most people didn't understand about her job. It wasn't about pulling a trigger. Any fool could do that. It was about the waiting, the watching, the willingness to remain absolutely still while every muscle screamed for movement. The convoy was halfway through the valley when it happened. The lead Humvee hit the IED. Not a huge explosion, just enough to disable the vehicle to stop the convoy to turn moving targets into stationary ones, exactly as predicted. Then the valley erupted. Gunfire from 3 positions, not 6. They'd split their force. Interesting choice. Effective, though. The convoy was pinned. Soldiers scrambled for cover. Return fire was sporadic, panicked. On the east ridge, Jax and his team opened up, suppressing one of the enemy positions. But the other 2 were out of their angle. They couldn't help. Anna's scope was already on the first shooter. She'd seen him move into position 3 minutes before he fired his first shot. She'd watched him settle in. She'd calculated the wind drift, the elevation, the Coriolis effect, the air density, all the invisible variables that turned a bullet into a prayer or a promise. She exhaled slowly, halfway out. Her finger took up the slack on the trigger. The world narrowed to a circle of magnified clarity, a man's silhouette, a crosshair. A decision made long before this moment. She pressed. The rifle spoke once. A sound like distant thunder. The man on the far ridge collapsed, but something was different this time. Something Anna hadn't felt in years. A flicker of something, not quite doubt, not quite hesitation, but recognition. That man had a story, had a reason, had people waiting for him somewhere. She pushed the thought away, filed it under irrelevant data. Her scope was already moving, finding the second target. This was her burden to carry. This was the weight no one saw when they looked at her clean uniform and quiet demeanor. How many lives does a single bullet save? It's not a simple equation, not mathematics, it's philosophy, ethics. A weight that sits in your chest long after the gun goes silent. Anna's second shot took the machine gunner on the northern ridge. He never knew she was there, never heard the shot. One moment he was laying down fire that had the convoy pinned, and the next moment he simply wasn't. The third shooter was smarter. He'd gone to ground after the first 2 died, trying to figure out where death was coming from. He moved positions. Crawled behind a boulder, thought he was safe. Anna tracked him through her scope. She watched him peek out, watched him scan the east ridge where Jax and his team were firing. He thought the threat was there. Everyone always thought the threat was there. The loud, obvious, aggressive force that announced itself with volume. He never looked west, never considered that death could come from the quiet side, from the position the general had deemed safe, from the woman they'd mocked that morning. Her third shot found him behind his boulder. The bullet entered through the gap he'd created when he raised his rifle. Precision, not luck, never luck. The valley was quieter now, but not silent. There were more, she could feel them, could sense the pattern. Two more shooters had repositioned after their comrades fell. They were disciplined, experienced. They'd figured out the kills were coming from range, from elevation, from somewhere they couldn't see. They were trying to extract, to fade back into the mountains. Anna couldn't allow that, not because of orders, not because of duty, but because of what would happen if they got away. They'd come back. Tomorrow. Next week. Different convoy. Different soldiers. Men like Jax and Chen who didn't deserve to die because she'd let threats walk away. She found the fourth shooter. He was running, actually sprinting across open ground toward a ravine that would give him cover. It was a desperate move, a calculated risk. He was gambling that whoever was killing his team couldn't lead a moving target at this range. It was a bad gamble. Anna's fourth shot dropped him mid-stride. He tumbled forward into the dust and lay still. The fifth shooter had gone to ground, completely. He'd found a depression in the earth and had made himself invisible. Smart. Disciplined, but Anna had seen where he'd been before. She knew the terrain, she knew where he'd go. She watched that spot for 2 minutes, waiting, not moving, barely breathing. Then she saw it, the smallest shift. A patch of shadow that changed shape just slightly. That was enough. Her fifth shot went through 18 inches of earth and scrub brush before it found him. When the radio crackled with the convoys all clear, when the surviving soldiers began moving again, extracting their wounded, securing the vehicles, Anna remained in position. She swept the valley one more time, methodical, complete, looking for movement, for threats, for anything she'd missed. There was nothing. The ambush had been broken. 9 hostile fighters eliminated. 0 friendly casualties. A perfect day by military metrics. But Anna's jaw was tight. Her hands, usually so steady, trembled just slightly as she made the rifle safe. She'd felt something during that fourth shot, the running man. She'd seen his face clearly through the scope in that final second. Young, maybe 20, terror in his eyes, not the face of an ideologue or a fanatic, just a kid who'd made bad choices and run out of time. She pushed the thought away, pushed it down into the place where she kept all the others, the place that was getting crowded. The place that sometimes woke her at 300 with images she couldn't unsee. This was the part they never showed in the briefings, the part the general would never understand. It wasn't the shooting that took its toll. Any soldier could pull a trigger. It was the seeing, the knowing, the carrying. She began to pack up her rifle, slow, methodical, each piece wrapped carefully, returned to its foam bed. Her hands went through the motions while her mind was somewhere else, somewhere darker, wondering if the young man's mother would ever know what happened, would ever understand why he didn't come home. Down in the valley, the convoy was moving again, slower now, more cautious. They'd learned what the grinder meant. On the east ridge, Jax and his team were packing up too. She could hear excited voices on the radio. They were claiming 3 kills, congratulating each other. They didn't know, didn't understand. Those 3 kills were targets she'd already eliminated. They'd been shooting at corpses, at positions already neutralized. Let them have their moment. Let them believe they'd made a difference. Truth was a luxury in places like this. Anna slung her pack, picked up her rifle case, and started the long walk back down the mountain. Alone, the way she preferred it. The sun was high now, brutal. The heat pressed down like a physical weight. Sweat ran down her back, stinging in places where the pack straps had rubbed skin raw. Her legs ached. Her shoulders burned, but she welcomed the discomfort. It was honest, real, something she could quantify and manage, unlike the weight in her chest that had nothing to do with gear. She thought about the man she'd killed through the earth, the one hiding in the depression. Had he known in that final moment? Had he felt the impact before his brain stopped processing? Or had it been instant, lights out? No transition, just existence and then nothing. She hoped it was the latter. She always hoped it was the latter, even for the enemy, especially for the enemy. They were somebody's son, somebody's father, somebody's reason to wake up in the morning, just like her targets. Just like the soldiers she'd saved. This was the arithmetic that kept her awake at night. 9 dead so 20 could live. Was that math moral? Was it righteous? Or was it just efficient? She didn't have an answer. She'd stopped looking for 1 year ago. Now she just did the job, made the shots, carried the weight, walked the long walk back down the mountain. Alone, always alone. Because that's what this kind of precision cost. That's what they never mentioned in the after-action reports. What changes in a person's eyes when they truly see you? Anna noticed it the moment she walked back through the fob gates. The atmosphere around her had shifted. Soldiers working on a vehicle stopped mid-wrench. Men heading to the mess hall slowed their pace, turned to watch her pass. The whispers that followed were different now. The mockery was gone, replaced by something else. Awe, disbelief, a healthy dose of fear. The news had spread like wildfire. From the command tent to the radio operators to the convoy survivors to everyone else. The quiet woman from the West Ridge. The ghost who'd single-handedly broken the Zarin Valley ambush. Jax and Chen were standing near the barracks, their faces smudged with dirt and cordite. Chen had a field dressing on his arm, but he was on his feet. They saw her coming. There was no smirking now, no condescending jokes. As Anna drew level with them, Jax snapped to rigid attention, without hesitation, without prompt. Chen immediately followed suit. It was a gesture far beyond what was required for her rank. It was a salute of profound battlefield respect. The kind of salute you give to someone who saved your life. Anna paused. She looked at the two young soldiers, truly seeing them for the first time. She saw the shock still lingering in their eyes, the dawning comprehension of how close they'd come to death, how close their bodies had come to going home in flag-draped boxes, how close their mothers had come to getting that knock on the door. She gave them a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was enough. She continued on her way. Jax and Chen held their salute until she'd passed, then slowly relaxed, watching her go with expressions of utter reverence. A larger figure stepped out from the shadows of the command tent, blocking her path. General Marcus Thorne. He stood alone, without his usual retinue of aides. The setting sun cast his large frame in silhouette. For a long moment he said nothing. He just stood there, a man wrestling with the complete demolition of his own worldview. The arrogance was gone from his posture. The bluster had been stripped away, leaving something more somber, more real. He looked at the small, quiet woman before him. The woman he had so thoroughly and publicly misjudged. An apology would have been easy, but it would have been cheap. Men like Thorne didn't apologize, they acknowledged. Slowly, with a rigid formality that stunned the few onlookers who witnessed it, General Marcus Thorne brought his hand up to his brow. It was not the casual, perfunctory salute he gave to subordinates. It was the sharp, palm-out salute of a soldier to a peer. The salute one gives to a Medal of Honor recipient, to a visiting head of state. It was the ultimate admission of his error. The highest form of respect he was capable of giving. "Sergeant," his voice was a low, gravelly rumble cleared of all its previous condescension. "Your positioning on that ridge was exemplary." It was a colossal understatement, they both knew it. He wasn't complimenting her choice of location. He was acknowledging her mastery, her lethality, her legend. He was admitting in his own way that he had been a fool, that he had measured worth in the wrong currency, that he had confused presence with capability, that he had almost gotten good men killed because of his arrogance. Anna stopped, faced him. Her expression was, as always, unreadable, but she looked him directly in the eye, and for the first time he saw the immense ancient stillness that lay behind them, the weight she carried, the price she'd paid, the toll that precision extracted from the human soul. She returned his gesture with a salute that was technically perfect, crisp, correct. "Thank you, General." Her voice was as level and calm as it had been that morning. No triumph, no vindication, just acknowledgement. She held the salute for a beat, then dropped her hand, stepped around him, and continued on toward the barracks, leaving the general standing alone in the deepening twilight. The power dynamic in the fob had shifted, not through rank or title, not through politics or connections, but through the undeniable visceral proof of competence. The myth was real, and the general had just saluted it. Anna felt nothing about the exchange. No satisfaction, no pride. It was just another data point. Another moment filed away. The general's respect changed nothing about who she was or what she'd done that day. She thought about the young running man again, the fourth shot, his face. She wondered if the general had ever looked into the eyes of the men he'd killed, if he'd ever been close enough to see fear, confusion, the moment of understanding. Probably not. Men like Thorne gave orders from command tents, watched battles through drone feeds, measured success in statistics. They never smelled the copper tang of blood, never felt the recoil of responsibility, never carried faces home. That evening the fob settled into a guarded quiet. Generators hummed their constant, monotonous tune. Soldiers still processing the day's events spoke in hushed tones in the mess hall in the barracks. The legend of the Zarin Valley was already being written, embellished, transformed from fact into mythology. Anna was not in her bunk. She was not in the mess hall. She was in a small, utilitarian maintenance bay at the far end of the compound, a place smelling of solvent and gun oil. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling, casting a pool of harsh yellow light on the concrete floor. In the center of that light she knelt before a clean canvas cloth. Her rifle was completely disassembled, every pin, every spring, every lever and component laid out in a precise, almost surgical array. The heavy barrel, the bolt carrier group, the trigger assembly, the finely machined chassis, each piece was an old friend. She began her ritual. With a soft, lint-free cloth she wiped down the bolt. Her fingers moved with familiar, loving precision. She cleaned away the fine layer of carbon and dust, her touch both firm and gentle. She used a series of rods and brushes to clean the barrel, working from the breech to the muzzle in long, smooth strokes. The rhythmic scrape of the brush was the only sound in the bay. This was not a chore, it was communion, it was her way of centering herself, of washing away the grim work of the day. The weapon was a tool, an instrument of her will, and it deserved this respect, this meticulous care. In this quiet, focused act she found her own equilibrium, the chaos of the battle, the shouting, the explosions, the dying, it all faded away, replaced by the simple, tangible reality of steel, oil, and practiced motion. She was not thinking of the 9 men whose lives she had ended. She was not thinking of the general's salute or the soldier's awestruck stares. She was thinking only of the perfect seating of a firing pin, the precise application of lubricant to a slide rail, the smooth operation of a trigger mechanism. This was where she lived, in the details, in the mechanics, in the space between breaths where nothing existed but the work. Can you watch someone without them, knowing they're being seen? Jax couldn't sleep. The events of the day played over and over in his mind, the sudden violence, Chen's cry of pain when the shrapnel caught his arm, the sheer hopelessness of being pinned down, the certain knowledge that he was about to die in a valley whose name he couldn't even pronounce, and then the silence, that impossible, beautiful silence as the enemy guns stopped, one by one, like someone was flipping switches. He'd thought it was air support at first, then realized no jets had come, no artillery. Just silence. He got up, walked out into the cool night air, needing to move, needing to escape the confines of the barracks and the weight of his own thoughts. His wandering path took him past the maintenance bay. He heard the faint sound of metal on metal and peered through the open doorway. He saw her, Sergeant Petrova, kneeling in the stark light, her legendary rifle in pieces around her. She was completely absorbed in her work, her face a mask of serene concentration. He stopped, hidden in the shadows, and simply watched. He had expected to see a monster, a remorseless killer, the kind of person who could take 9 lives before breakfast and feel nothing. But the woman he saw was something else entirely. He saw a craftsman, an artist devoted to her craft. He saw discipline and focus that he couldn't begin to fathom. There was reverence in the way she handled each piece of the rifle, a quiet dignity in her solitude, no celebration, no pride, just work. Just care, just ritual. In that moment, Jax understood something profound. Her lethality wasn't born of rage or bloodlust. It wasn't born of hatred or ideology. It was born of this absolute, unwavering, deeply personal pursuit of perfection. Every movement was deliberate. Every action had purpose. She wasn't cleaning a weapon. She was maintaining a relationship, honoring a partnership, respecting the tool that allowed her to do impossible things. He felt a profound sense of humility wash over him. Shame even. He had mocked this woman, judged her by her size, by her quiet demeanor, by the cleanliness of her uniform. He had measured her worth using metrics that had nothing to do with capability. He had been a fool just like the general, worse even, because the general at least had the excuse of distance, of command. of the weight of responsibility that came with stars on your collar. Jax had no such excuse. He'd been cruel for sport, for entertainment, for the cheap thrill of feeling superior to someone. He watched for a few more minutes, the image burning itself into his memory, her hands moving with practiced grace, the concentration on her face, the way she paused occasionally, holding a component up to the light, examining it with the scrutiny of a jeweler inspecting a diamond. Then, feeling like he was intruding on something sacred, he backed away, slowly, silently, leaving her to her ritual. He walked back to the barracks with new weight in his chest, not guilt exactly, something more complex. Recognition, maybe, of the distance between who he was and who he could become. Inside the maintenance bay, Anna finished her work. She reassembled the rifle with the same methodical grace. The final piece, the bolt, slid home with a solid, satisfying click. The sound echoed slightly in the quiet bay. Her weapon was whole again, clean, ready. She stood and walked to the doorway, leaning against the frame. She looked out past the perimeter fence toward the dark, hulking shapes of the mountains. They were silent now, holding their secrets. The first hint of dawn was beginning to lighten the eastern sky, painting the horizon in shades of gray and pale rose. A new day was coming, a new day of watching, of waiting, a new day of duty. The wind picked up, cool and clean. She closed her eyes, feeling it on her face. The cycle would continue. Tomorrow there would be another mission, another valley, another set of variables to calculate and targets to eliminate. Another burden to carry. She thought about the young man again, the runner. His face was already fading in her memory, joining the others. Dozens of faces, maybe hundreds. She'd stopped counting years ago. Did that make her a monster? She'd asked herself that question 1,000 times, never found a satisfying answer. Monsters didn't clean their rifles with reverence. Monsters didn't feel the weight. Monsters didn't stand in doorways at dawn wondering about the mothers of men they'd killed. But monsters didn't save convoys either. Didn't keep men like Jax and Chen alive to see another sunrise. Didn't shoulder the burden so others wouldn't have to. The moral calculus was impossible. The math didn't work. It never would. Oh, she did the only thing she could do. She prepared, she trained, she maintained her equipment. She studied the wind and the terrain and the patterns of human behavior. She made herself into the most precise instrument of violence she could be. Because if she was going to carry this weight, if she was going to bear this burden, she was damn well going to do it perfectly. Half measures didn't honor the dead. Sloppiness didn't justify the cost. Precision was the only dignity she could offer to them, to herself. She opened her eyes. The sky was lighter now. Rose had given way to gold. The mountains were sharp and clear against the brightening horizon, beautiful in their way, deadly in theirs. She pushed off from the doorframe and walked back into the maintenance bay. There was always more work to do, always another detail to perfect, always another edge to sharpen. The rifle was clean, but her pack needed reorganization. Her boots needed treatment. Her logbook needed updating. The work never stopped. That was the secret they didn't teach you, the secret you learned only by living it. There was no finish line, no moment of completion, no day when you could set down the burden and walk away clean. There was only the next mission, the next mountain, the next valley with a name that promised death, and you either carried your weight with dignity or you broke under it. Anna had no intention of breaking. Not today, not ever. The wind carried the smell of dust and diesel, familiar, almost comforting. This was her world, these were her people, this was her burden. What does respect look like when it's real? 3 days later, a new convoy formed up. Same route, same valley, different mission. Anna watched from her position as the soldiers loaded equipment, checked weapons, performed pre-combat inspections. The atmosphere was different this time, tighter, more focused. Word had spread beyond the fob. Every soldier in the convoy knew about the Zarin Valley, knew about the ghost on the West Ridge. Some of them had been there, had survived because of her. Others had just heard the stories. But they all understood something fundamental had changed. General Thorne emerged from the command tent. He walked to where Anna stood, checking her rifle case one final time before moving out. The other soldiers nearby instinctively gave them space, created a bubble of privacy through unconscious deference. Thorne stopped a respectful distance away, not the casual, dismissive proximity of their first meeting. This was different, measured. Sergeant Petrova. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. I want you to know something. Anna looked up at him, waited. Thorne's jaw worked for a moment, the words clearly difficult. Finally, he spoke. I've been in this uniform for 27 years, commanded men in 3 wars, seen things that would break most people, and I've made a lot of mistakes, a lot of bad calls, but putting you on that West Ridge, he paused, shook his head slowly. That might have been the smartest thing I never meant to do. You saved lives, Sergeant. Good men who get to go home because of you. I just wanted you to know that, officially, personally. Anna nodded once. Thank you, sir. No elaboration, no false modesty, just acknowledgement. Thorne started to turn away, then stopped. Petrova, the West Ridge position, that's yours now. For as long as you're at this fob, no one else. Your discretion, your call, understood. Understood, sir. He did turn away then, but his gait was different, heavier somehow, like he'd set down a weight by speaking those words. Anna watched him go, then returned to her equipment check. Jax appeared at her side, hesitant, uncertain. Sergeant, she glanced at him, waited, he swallowed hard. I wanted to apologize for what I said that first day, the accountant thing, the latrine joke. You were being a soldier, Anna said quietly. Her voice held no anger, no judgment. Young, confident, untested, it's normal. It was disrespectful, Jax insisted. I didn't know, you couldn't know, Anna interrupted gently. That's how it works. You see the exterior, you make assumptions, then life teaches you better. Jax looked down at his boots. Chen and me, we've been talking about that day, about how close, he trailed off. When he looked back up, his eyes were wet. You didn't just save the convoy, Sergeant, you saved us specifically. We were on that East Ridge, pinned down, Chen was hit. I was out of ammo, I'd made peace with dying, and then, silence, we didn't even know it was you until later. Didn't know someone was watching over us. Anna's expression softened almost imperceptibly. That's the job, Corporal. Someone always has to watch. Someone always has to be the one scanning the horizons while everyone else focuses on the immediate threat. It's not glamorous, it's not loud, but it matters. It matters, Jax repeated like he was memorizing the words. Yeah, I get that now, I really do. He straightened, came to attention, saluted properly. Thank you, Sergeant, for everything. Anna returned the salute, held his gaze for a moment, saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before, maturity, understanding, the beginning of wisdom. Stay alive, Corporal, that's the best thanks you can give. Jax nodded, started to walk away, then turned back. Sergeant, one more thing, that rifle of yours, the way you maintain it, I saw you that night in the maintenance bay. Anna's eyebrow raised slightly. I didn't mean to spy, Jax said quickly. I couldn't sleep, I was walking. And I saw you, the way you cleaned every piece like it was sacred or something. It is sacred, Anna said simply. Every tool that keeps us alive deserves that respect. Every piece of equipment that stands between us and death deserves meticulous care. You want to stay alive, Corporal, learn that lesson. Your weapon isn't just a tool, it's a partner, treat it accordingly. Jax nodded slowly. I will, I promise. He walked away then, really walked away. And Anna could see the difference in how he carried himself. Straighter, more purposeful, more aware. And approached next. His arm still bandaged but healing. He didn't say anything, just stood next to her for a moment looking out at the mountains. Finally he spoke. My mom wanted me to be a doctor, said I had good hands, steady. She cried when I enlisted. Anna listened, said nothing. Chen continued. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, about her tears, about why she was so afraid. I get it now. She wasn't afraid I'd die. She was afraid of what I'd become, what war does to people. War changes everyone, Anna said quietly. The question is how, whether you let it make you better or bitter, whether you use the experience to grow or to harden. Which did it do to you? Chen asked, then immediately looked embarrassed. Sorry, that's too personal, you don't have to. Both, Anna said, her voice was distant, thoughtful. It made me better at my job, more precise, more capable, but it also took things, pieces of who I used to be, pieces I'll never get back. Chen absorbed that. Do you regret it, choosing this path? Anna thought about the question, really thought about it. Regret is a luxury. I made choices. Those choices had consequences, some good, some hard, but they were mine. And because of those choices, men like you get to call your mother tonight, get to hear her voice, maybe become that doctor she wanted. That's not regret, that's purpose. Chen's eyes filled with tears. He blinked them away quickly. "Thank you, Sergeant, for the second chance." "Thank you for making it count," Anna replied. She watched him walk away, rejoin his unit. Watched the convoy finish loading. Watched the organized chaos of deployment. In a few hours she'd be back on that ridge, back in position. Back watching over soldiers who didn't know she was there until the moment she saved their lives. It was a strange existence, powerful and invisible, respected and alone, essential and unknown, but it was hers. The convoy rolled out. Anna moved to her transport. A different vehicle this time. The driver, a grizzled staff sergeant, nodded respectfully as she climbed in. "Ma'am." "Sergeant," she corrected gently. "Yes, Sergeant," he said, but his tone carried the deference of addressing an officer. The rifle case sat between her knees. Her pack was secured at her feet. The vehicle lurched into motion, joining the convoy's route toward the valley, toward the mountains, toward another day of watching, of waiting, of carrying the weight so others wouldn't have to. She looked out the window at the passing landscape. The dust, the rocks, the endless, brutal beauty of a place that killed without mercy and honored without sentiment. This was her calling, not chosen exactly, but accepted, refined, mastered. She was the watcher in the shadows, the guardian no one saw, the precise instrument of salvation delivered from impossible distances. She was the ghost of the West Ridge, the legend of the Zarin Valley, the woman who turned dismissal into vindication not through words but through action, through competence, through the undeniable proof that respect isn't given, it's earned, one impossible shot at a time. The convoy disappeared into the valley, and on a ridge overlooking the killing ground a woman knelt in the dust, her rifle assembled, her breathing controlled, her purpose clear. Watching, always watching, ready, always ready. The wind whispered across the rocks. The sun climbed toward its merciless zenith, and in the silence between heartbeats in the space where mathematics became destiny, Sergeant Anna Petrova did what she did best. She waited. She watched. She protected. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And when it acts with precision, with discipline, with absolute unwavering commitment to protecting those who cannot protect themselves, it becomes something more than duty. It becomes honor, the truest kind, the quiet kind, the kind that needs no recognition because it exists for a purpose larger than self, the kind that asks nothing and gives everything, the kind that carries the weight so others can walk free. That's what they saw when they looked at her now. Not size, not gender, not assumptions. They saw capability. They saw protection. They saw the difference between going home and going home in a box. And in seeing that, they learned what the general had learned, what Jax and Chen had learned, what everyone who survived the Zarin Valley had learned. Respect isn't measured in volume. It's measured in results. And some of the most powerful forces in the world move in absolute silence, until the moment they don't, until the moment precision becomes salvation, until the moment a single shot from an impossible distance changes everything. That's when silence speaks loudest. That's when the quiet ones inherit the earth. That's when you realize the person you dismissed, the soldier you mocked, the woman you underestimated was the only thing standing between you and oblivion. Anna knew this, had always known this, but she didn't need them to know it, didn't need their validation or their respect or their awe. She needed only the wind's speed, the range, the clear line of sight, and the absolute certainty that when she pressed that trigger, when she made that call, when she took that life to save others, it would be done with the precision and dignity that the terrible mathematics of war demanded. The valley stretched out below, silent, waiting, full of threats unseen, full of dangers unspoken, but she was there, on the ridge, in position, ready, and that made all the difference. Because somewhere in that convoy, men like Jax and Chen were trusting in armor and training and luck, but they had something better, something they didn't even know was there. They had her. And she had never missed, not when it mattered, not when lives hung in the balance. Not when the only thing standing between survival and death was one woman, one rifle, and the absolute refusal to accept anything less than perfect. The scope settled, the crosshair steadied, the breath released halfway, And in the silence, in the stillness, in the space where discipline met destiny, she whispered words only she would ever hear. "I've got you." And she did, always, without fail, without recognition, without reward, just the quiet satisfaction of another mission, another day, another group of soldiers who would never know how close they'd come, who would go home to their families and their futures and their dreams alive because someone they'd never see was watching, always watching, forever watching. That was enough. That was everything. That was the burden and the blessing, the weight and the wings, the silence and the salvation. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And when it acts with absolute precision, it changes the world, one impossible shot at a time.